Well, everyone, we get to finally talk about one of the, our first Xboxes that we're talking about this year, and it's actually the original Xbox One. Now, this console is a crazy console when you consider the age of it. I mean, it sits in the same suit as the PlayStation 4, the original one, and these were some of the craziest consoles both of these manufacturers ever pushed out. And with the Xbox One, I mean, this thing, even though it's a bit dated, it's approaching almost 10 years old next year, it's crazy because it doesn't really seem like it's this old. I love the PlayStation 4 and I love the Xbox Ones because it just seemed like they really focused in on what made gaming so important. There were no gimmicks, there were no like super crazy like, oh, buy this and you can like do this and this crazy thing. Like there wasn't anything like that. This was a solid couple of years for gaming for sure. And now with the newer consoles, I mentioned this when I bought my Xbox Series X and S and I did those comparisons and reviews. I said that even if you still own the original Xbox One, it's still going to take a couple of years for the transition to properly be through when the, original Xbox One is outdated. And even now, I don't even think the original Xbox One is completely outdated. Like, yes, it's not really like amazing anymore, but it still has a lot of capability. And when I look at my Xbox One and I look at the games that are coming out for the Series X and S, I still see a lot of overlap, to be honest. Like, we still have GTA 5, that's another big thing. We still have a lot of games that we still have a lot of games that are being released in the future that haven't really even released yet. I mean, we just got Halo Infinite, and that thing was supposed to come out, a while ago. And in my opinion, that just goes to show how great some of these older consoles were, including this original Xbox One. Now, I would probably not recommend picking it up for your main console. I would highly recommend picking up a One S or an Xbox One X. Those are going to be much better in pretty much every single way. But, I mean, we could still appreciate this original Xbox. Now, this was the successor to the Xbox 360 lineup, which that was a very good selling console. From what I understand, most of those consoles, the original Xbox 360 sold very well, and then so on and so forth. Now, the Xbox One came out in 2013. Now, outside on the body, I still think this thing looks pretty beautiful, but this is a massive console. You will not understand how thick this thing is. It's like a VCR player from like 1970s. It is crazy how big this thing still looks. You have the disc slot on the front, which I personally liked. I liked having that disc slot on the front. Unfortunately, with the Series S, we don't really have it anymore, but I think it's totally okay. You had the fans and everything on the back, but you also had a ton of ports. And one thing that I mentioned in my, Series S and X comparisons I did, 2 years ago, or about a year and a half ago, whatever, a lot of these ports actually ended up being removed, even on the Series X, which was weird. So on the back, we had the AC adapter, which was cool. Then we had two HDMI ports. We had an HDMI in, and we had an HDMI out. Now, why do you need two HDMI ports? Well, essentially, if you had a monitor that maybe only had one HDMI port, well, instead of like unplugging one HDMI and plugging in the other one, you could actually just go ahead and just put the HDMI into your specific Xbox, and you can stream your specific, other console or your other device through your Xbox to your monitor, which was really cool. So I know a lot of people who would like put like an Apple TV and plug it into your Xbox, or even like a Nintendo Switch or even a PlayStation, plug it into your Xbox and stream that to the monitor instead of taking up two different ports on your, monitor. Unfortunately, Xbox and Microsoft removed that from this one, but I think it was cool, whatever. It was a really cool feature at the time. We had two USB ports on the back, we had the Ethernet port, and we had another port for the Kinect, which nobody really even use anymore. But that was a really good selection of ports to have in this type of console. And in my opinion, like I mentioned, that was probably one of the best, port selections that we got from an Xbox at this moment. Again, with the One X, we kind of got the same thing with USB ports on the front. Unfortunately, Xbox kind of took away some of those ports, but it's okay, it's not a big deal. But we also had the controller of this specific console as well. And the controller, in my opinion, was really, really good. I actually still use this controller a lot. My only disadvantage of these type of controllers is that when you buy them with a base console and everything, you have to, use the actual digital, you have to use like the actual batteries, the AA batteries. And even at this moment, even before this moment with the PlayStation 3s, and I even think with the PlayStation 2s, you could charge your controller. You didn't have to buy any extra accessories. Like even with PlayStation 5 controllers, you can just go ahead and charge the controller. Even with the Series X and S controller, you have to take out batteries and do it, or you have to buy extra batteries, which some people prefer, but me personally, I wish I could just opt in for the rechargeable battery rather than having to, buy batteries and all that crazy stuff. but the controller still feels really good. I don't really have too many complaints about the controller anymore, and I still think it looks and feels very good. Still one of my favorite controllers out there. Now, when this console first came out, it retailed for $499. It sold apparently 42.2 million units. I don't know if that's combined all Xbox One sales or just the one itself, but I still think this console has a lot of power. I think it still is pretty relevant, to be honest. But one of my downsides of the original Xbox One, not only is it the bulkiness and everything, but actually with the fan noise. With a lot of these older Xbox Ones, especially if you're buying them in the used market, they actually do have a lot of dust and stuff stuck within it. And because of that, unless you know what you're doing and you can like pry out all that dust and everything, you can actually end up getting a super loud Xbox One. But this is very common with a lot of older consoles too. My original PlayStation 4 also experienced this, but it's kind of an annoying thing. I don't think it's like a deal breaker. Most people already kind of know what to expect, but as long as you're keeping your Xbox in a pretty cool environment, you should be okay. But this Xbox actually had a lot of fan noise issues as far as I can tell. Now, because this console came out in 2013, it wasn't until a couple years later that we actually got the successor to this, which was the Xbox One S. And that by far is one of my favorite, not only favorite consoles of all time, but one of my favorite looking consoles of all time too, which was really cool. Now within this console, we actually had 8 gigs of RAM, or flash memory, whatever they want to call it. We had a CPU with 8 cores. We had a really decent GPU as far as I can tell. You did have a hard drive on the specific console, but you can always go ahead and add an external hard drive if you want to. And the best thing about this specific console were the games that came out for it. There are still so many games out for this specific console, which kind of makes me think that this is still extremely relevant. There are so many games you can just go ahead and buy. You can go to GameStop, you can go on eBay and buy these physical games and put them into your specific Xbox One. And another big thing is that with the original Xbox One, you can still download games from the Xbox store and literally just install them onto your Xbox that way too. So you don't have to go and go inside of a store and go ahead and manage all that. You can just go inside of your Xbox store and download your games that way. And that is another really big asset for it. As I mentioned, you want to have that option. That's one thing about the Series S I wasn't a big fan of, because they removed that disc slot, and the PlayStation 5 did that with the digital model too. But this original Xbox One has everything you need for it, in my opinion. Now, some of the downsides, of course, you can tell when you're using a hard drive, load speeds are going to be slow, gaming speeds are pretty much going to be kind of slower too, but it's still completely playable. And that's the big thing to keep in mind. I think my only downside of this console is just how big and massive it is and how loud it can get. But I think other than that, when you consider what this console brought at that time, and when you consider that it was a really powerful console at that moment, it was very beautiful. It was very good. It had a lot going for it. And because I was kind of a big fan of the Xbox 360e design, I kind of still like the Xbox One because they look so familiar. Even though the Xbox 360s, or the slim model, was one of my favorite designed Xboxes, this one still looks very good. I still think it has a lot of capability. However, I don't think it's necessarily the right Xbox One you should pick up. I think the Xbox One S is actually a really good upgrade coming from the Xbox One. And because of that, you can probably buy an Xbox One and an Xbox One S for around the same price, so it's not really that big of a deal. So I would probably recommend, buying an Xbox One S over the original Xbox One, but I still love the Xbox One. I still think it's a great console. It again has a lot going for it, and even though I would probably recommend buying the Xbox One S, the Xbox One still has a lot of capability for sure. So in terms of that pretty much covers it up. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.